The Premier of Saskatchewan is Brad Wall, and Premier Wall, I assume, got that invitation, and he is joining us now from Saskatoon. Premier Wall, good to see you. Did you get an invitation to come on January the 16th, and do you plan to come?
Good evening, Don. I did, and the answer is yes. We'll be represented. The province will be going. I'll be going. You know, there had been some significant progress, I would say, since the 14th of October between the federal government and the provinces. Talk about infrastructure acceleration, perhaps infrastructure increases in terms of investment, support for federal steps that have been taken with respect to liquidity in the markets and working with the Canadian banks in the market turmoil that was here. Discussions about initiatives to ensure that First Nations, that Aboriginal people in Canada were more engaged in our economy, that education was going to be supported, and so that was progress being made up until very recently, as you know, Don.
Were you surprised, though, to get an invitation to a meeting from a man who may not be the Prime Minister on the 16th of January? And if he is not, and Mr. Dion is, and the meeting goes ahead, would you come as well? You wouldn't care? You'd come anyway?
I don't think there are many surprises these days for people who are watching politics, including yourself, Don, or those who are elected. You know, the people in Saskatchewan, I just sense they're frustrated. They're angry with all the federal leaders, angry that we're here in the first place, that movement, that actions taken not long ago precipitated these events. But they're even more alarmed that even though those are problems, important problems, serious problems, more alarmed that the answer seems to be heading towards an unelected coalition government dependent on and basically a de facto veto given to separatists. That is not the stability we need economically in this country today. It's not the message I do not believe we need to be sending. And I think it's important the confidence in this government will be expressed after a budget is presented, after premiers in the federal government have worked out the stimulus package that's necessary, and there's the opportunity for the confidence vote.
Well, excuse me for interrupting. You know how time flies. But there's an opportunity to have that confidence expressed or not expressed on Monday, and it would appear that there's going to be a prorogation to avoid that vote. And I recall when you were elected in 1999 and Premier Romano had a minority government in Saskatchewan, he delayed meeting the legislature for the longest period of time, mainly to avoid having a confidence vote, and you and your colleagues in the Saskatchewan Party were livid. So is it all right for Mr. Harper to now use the Romano technique when it wasn't for Mr. Romano?
Don, the difference was the NDP had actually won more seats than anybody else. The NDP had the leading number of seats, and that was my first election. You're absolutely right. But Premier,
they didn't have the confidence of the House. Otherwise, he would have met you. I mean, he knew what was going to happen when he did. So, you know, between you and the Liberals, you had more seats than he did. And that is basically, when you throw all three parties together in Ottawa, the situation Mr. Harper finds himself in is the same as Mr. Romano.
Don, it was very clear very early after the election, except for about a couple of weeks when the Liberals said they'd never give up the hammer, to use a curling analogy. I remember clearly that the coalition was formed. So it was pretty clear whenever the House met that Mr. Romano with his coalition would have the confidence of the Legislative Assembly. People were upset that the minority government they had voted had turned into a coalition government. But I lived through it, Don, and I don't recall any sense that the will of the House had been staved off in any way, because it was pretty clear through the media that this coalition was going to happen, and that they'd have the majority confidence of the House. Today in Canada, Don, people are worried about the fact that the government, as it's proposed for Monday, is going to need to rely on those who want to tear apart the country. I think they're concerned about the instability.
But they basically said they're not going to tear it apart for at least 18 months, and there's a stability in the agreement that doesn't exist now, or we would be having the confidence vote on Monday. Just very brief. I don't want to cut you off short, but we're getting tight.
Don, I can tell you that today separatists, you know, they're doing cartwheels in Quebec, pointing to extra money, $1 billion in equalization payments they're claiming will come as a result of this. They're saying this is a win for sovereignty in Quebec. That's not good for my Canada, your Canada. It's not good for the economy. So let's get to that budget process. The opposition parties can vote up or vote down the budget, but at least we'll have had that opportunity to see what's coming forward in a plan and staved off the chances of an unelected government that's dependent on separatists for its survival.
Brad Wall, time goes so quickly. Thanks for coming on.
Don, thank you.